How do you dismantle a democracy? It's probably not how you think. It's not usually with an army from the outside, but from within, by turning its own rules into weapons. Today, we're going to break down the historical playbook for how it's done.
So let's just ask the big question right up front. How does a democracy actually fall apart from the inside? Well, as history shows us, the answer is often not what you'd expect at all.
And here's the wild part. The most effective way to kill a democracy is to convince it to commit suicide. It's not some sudden violent coup. It's gradual. It's voted away, piece by piece, using the very legal tools of the system to tear it down from the inside out. So let's get right into the playbook. The whole process really begins long before an authoritarian leader has total control. It starts by destabilizing the system from within.
Step 1 is absolutely crucial. You have to erode public trust by making political violence seem, well, normal. The goal is to make the country feel chaotic, unsafe, ungovernable, creating a demand for a strongman to come in and restore order.
Now check this out, because this shows the two-pronged attack they used in Weimar Germany. Long before Hitler was even chancellor, he had two private armies. On one hand, you had the SA, the brown shirts. They were the blunt instrument, a massive street army just for brawling and scaring political opponents. On the other hand, you had the SS, a smaller, elite, and absolutely fanatical unit. Both of them were basically operating in this legal gray area, creating chaos for years.
And then, here comes the masterstroke. The second Hitler gets even a little bit of government power, he deputizes these guys. Overnight, 50,000 of these violent party thugs become auxiliary police. And just like that, the line between a political party's street muscle and the official power of the state is completely erased.
Okay, so you see how this is building, right? Once that line between law and violence is blurred, the next step is to use a crisis, and it can be a real one or a manufactured one, to legally wipe out civil rights entirely.
And this timeline is just astonishing. It shows you the incredible speed of the takeover. On January 30th, Hitler is appointed chancellor. Less than a month later, the parliament building mysteriously burns down. The very next day, boom, the Reichstag fire decree is signed. And just like that, the legal foundation of the entire democracy is shattered.
Now, it's so important to understand this wasn't a military coup. It was a piece of paper, a legal decree signed by the head of state that used the law itself to make lawlessness the new standard. It allowed for arrest without cause, imprisonment without trial, all under the convenient excuse of national security.
So, once you have the legal power to arrest pretty much anyone for anything, what's next? Well, the next step is to turn that power inward, not just against your political opponents, but against anyone who might challenge you, and that includes your own allies.
And this is one of the most chilling parts, the night of the long knives. The SA, remember them? The street brawlers who brought Hitler to power? Well, now they were a liability. So, a threat was just invented, a totally fake coup plot. And the state's new security forces, the SS and the Gestapo, were used to murder the regime's earliest and most loyal supporters.
So how do you get away with mass murder? You just pass a law making it legal. This is the actual text of the law they passed after the killings. It's not some complex legal document, it's one sentence declaring that the murders were, in fact, perfectly legal. It's the ultimate perversion of the rule of law.
And here it is, the final ideological step. With this single declaration, Hitler basically fused himself with the state. He wasn't just the leader anymore, he was the law. He put himself above any court, any parliament, any constitution. The dismantling was complete.
Okay, so that's the history. But how does this historical playbook shine a light on potential warning signs and maybe some legal trapdoors that exist in modern democracies today? Let's dive into it.
In the U.S., one law that experts often point to is the Insurrection Act of 1807. It's an old, kind of vaguely worded law that gives the president really extraordinary power to deploy the military right here on U.S. soil. It's seen as a potential emergency powers decree that could act as a legal trapdoor.
So you might be asking, how could a crisis be manufactured to trigger a law like that? Well, one model that gets discussed is the provoke, react, solve strategy. First, you create a provocation, like sending federal agents into a city where they aren't wanted. Second, you get the inevitable reaction, protests and unrest. And third, you have your solution. The leader points to the chaos that they helped create as the justification to declare an insurrection and seize control.
And it's not just the Insurrection Act. There are other potential loopholes.
For example, there's the Title 32 maneuver, a provision that could potentially allow a president to use one friendly state's National Guard in another state, creating a really messy legal gray area. Then there's the whole question of broad presidential immunity for official acts, which could, arguably, be interpreted to shield a leader from accountability. And remember, invoking the Insurrection Act itself suspends posse comitatus, and that's the crucial law that normally stops the military from being used as a domestic police force. Each of these represents a potential stress test for the entire system.
So, what are the key takeaways from all this? This slide really distills it perfectly. The warning signs from the 1930s playbook have direct counterparts in strategies for democratic defense today. When you see political violence becoming normal, the answer is zero tolerance. When you see law enforcement getting politicized, the defense is protecting independent oversight. And when you see emergencies being used to get around the courts, the firewall has to be absolute judicial review.
And all of this brings us to the final, really critical question that this history leaves us with. It's the ultimate paradox, right? For a democracy that's built on the rule of law, when the law itself is turned into the weapon, what guardrails are left, and who is there to apply them? It's a question that is absolutely worth thinking about.